This is Bible School Radio, KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, KYJC, Commerce, and KMWC, Bethany. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
How do you know when? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to this special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Tony Joe's here, as he is every Friday, to take your Car Corner questions. The number to call if you have a question for Tony Joe, 1-877-913-5357. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com. Send a question in, and I will get that answered for you. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. Tony Joe, how's it going?
It is going well, sir, and how are you?
I was doing good until I started to read the title of the program, and I pretty much butchered it. It's not how do you know when, Bob. It's what do you... No, wait a minute.
What do you do when? Yeah.
Well, what do you do when blank happens? Okay, so catch a break.
Okay.
Catch a break here today.
Kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing. Everybody's totally confused. But what we want to talk about?
Well, people are confused anyway. Whenever we get on
that's clear. So, what we wanted to talk about were the situations where you're driving along, everything's fine, and then something happens. What do you do when blank happens? Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's interesting as you and I were talking about this, what I would like to be able to do is talk about these different scenarios, and then you say, oh, it's either this or that. You know, it's real black or white, and then the listener leaves with a sense of, I just have to know this or this. And at the end of the day, as you and I have talked about, in what you do for business, what I do for business as well, is our clients or customers need to know how to interpret and need to be able to talk about the situation, let you handle the details. But the reality is that it's not just A or B, it's A, B, C, or D, or E, or F.
It could be a number of things.
But the good thing is if you can just get a hold of, okay, most of the time it's either A or B, then you're so much further ahead than you would be if you didn't know that.
Right, and information is the key. So the more informed a person is about their car, which is what we try to do on this program every week, is not teach you how to be a mechanic, but try to inform you about things that will help you and the technician that's trying to evaluate what's wrong so that you can give him symptoms. Anybody can go to the doctor and say, my throat's sore and my stomach's upset and and I got a headache. With a car, it's not quite that easy. The technician still needs to know symptoms, but it is hard sometimes if you're not knowledgeable about a car to even articulate the symptoms. And this is where a lot of confusion comes in, and as a result, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misdiagnostics, and a lot of wasted money.
So here we're going to go off the rabbit trail, but we're going to get back on. We're going to a topic, but I want to mention something every chance I get to mention it, because you see these commercials, or hear these commercials where the guy says, you know, if this has happened, just bring it down. We'll plug it up into our computer and we'll see what's wrong with it. Okay. If life were that easy.
If life were that easy.
And that is the biggest myth, that you can plug I mean, it may be right, but the chances are it's probably not. It's probably telling you where to look for the real problem.
99% of it is not going to be accurate. It's just so that people understand, coming from someone who's worked through the business from the early 70s right up until now and seen all the evolution and all the design and all the changes and all the technology the advances in technology, I can tell you right now, if somebody tells you they have a machine that just tells you what's wrong with the car, that is a falsehood. It's a misnomer. They're exaggerating. I don't want to say they're lying. They may really believe that. But there is no such device in the world where you plug in and it tells you what's wrong with your car. There are a lot of devices that you plug in. They're called scan tools. They're called, there's a lot of different nomenclature for a lot of different devices. But the point is, it gives you readings. It gives you data. It gives you basically a certain amount of data that you can then use to, with your education, to put together a scenario and a prognosis of what is most likely wrong. But there is no machine that people call me all the time. You got one of those machines that you plug in? No, nobody does. Well, the dealer has it. Well, no, they don't.
Yeah, it's always, as you've said, through so many years of doing radio together, it's the start of the process. It points you in a direction. It may not even be the right direction, but it points you in a direction so that you can start to unwind and figure out what's really going on.
A good analysis that I've often drawn to make people understand is in EKG. You go to, I don't even know if they do this the old-fashioned way anymore, but you go to a doctor and he puts you on a heart monitor, makes you walk on the treadmill or whatever they do now, and he reads out an EKG, and it's a graph on a piece of paper that he tears off when you're done, and he looks at it. That's data. He looks at the data that he's been given, and he does his very best with the knowledge and experience that he's had over many, many years as a doctor to try to understand what that EKG is telling him. Is this a good representation of a healthy heart, or is this a representation of something we need further testing? And when I say further testing, he looks at something, he may see something that's not quite right, but he doesn't jump to the conclusion there. It's going to require what? Further testing. It's the same exact thing in the automotive industry. You read the data and you see something that, I can pretty much rule this and this and this out, but that doesn't look right to me. So now let's get a voltmeter and hook it up to this sensor and check the sensor itself. We need further testing.
So it's been a while since you've been to a cardiologist, hasn't it?
About 40 years.
That's not good.
Of course, it doesn't matter because most people say I have no heart. So
there he goes. There he goes. Okay. 1-877-913-5357. So what do you do when your car overheats? That happened to a lot of people. I had someone come in yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday or the day before. And she said she was on a meeting on her phone, sitting in the parking lot waiting to come to see me. And all of a sudden, steam started coming out of her car. What do you do?
Well, here's the problem with that. You got to understand that overheating a car, first of all, is a very bad thing because a lot of cars now have aluminum heads, and they don't take a lot of abuse. In the old days, in the 70s, you had good old-fashioned cast iron, and you could overheat the car and fix whatever's wrong and pretty much depend that that's going to take care of it. Now you can damage the engine. You can warp the heads, crack the heads, blow a head gasket. You can do a lot of damage, expensive damage. So you really don't want to sit in a car for very long on these hot summer days with the air conditioning on waiting. I know it's cool, it's convenient, sit there, talk on your phone, but you try not to do that only because we have electric cooling fans now that can not work sometimes. There's a lot to the fan circuitry. The fan itself is a motor that turns on and off to create a draw through the front of the car to cool the radiator down and the air conditioner. And if you fail to turn that fan on, if the car fails to turn on that fan, it's going to overheat very quickly. What could possibly happen to that fan? Well, the fan motor itself could just be old and burn out, but it can also not be turned on electrically so that it will work. Let's say the fan motor is perfectly good, but there's a coolant sensor somewhere along the way that's not allowing the relay to close to turn on the cooling fan. The relay could go bad. There's radiator switches. You could be low on coolant. There's a whole scenario of things that could happen. So it's really not a healthy thing to do, to sit in a car for a long time on these really hot days like this. It is kind of bad for the car. The water pump is not spinning fast enough because the car is idling, so the water is not being circulated fast enough through the cooling system. So the fan does not always get triggered like it should if you had a vehicle running down the road at even 20 miles an hour. Everything is better in that circumstance. So
let's say that let me give you another similar scenario there. Let's say you're sitting on a major highway,
mm-hmm.
car to car to car, bumper to bumper,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you start to see the steam come out of from underneath the hood. Well, I mean, what do you do?
Well,
you just hope that never happens.
Right. See, when you're talking about steam coming out of from under the hood, it's too late at that point to do much of anything. However, I will back up a little bit and say, if you're ever in sitting still traffic with the car in drive, the air conditioner going, and there's a big tie-up, you want to keep your eye on the temperature gauge. Why would that be? Because if that temperature gauge starts to rise, you can do some proactive things before it gets to the point where it's going to be hot and steam's going to be coming out from under the hood.
You can actually prevent that?
For instance, well, you can try to slow it down and try to circumvent it getting any worse. You would, first of all, if it were me, nobody wants to hear this, but if you can dissipate some of the engine heat somewhere else, it will cool the engine back down. How would you do that? Well, you roll the windows down and you turn off your air conditioner and you turn the heater on. Oh, that sounds terrible. Well, it may not sound as terrible as a $10,000 engine, but, it's
right.
One of the things you can do.
This is Bob Brooks. We're up against a break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
And the Bible says when you're a Christian and you come to grips with that, now you can celebrate the fact that you're in one body with all the other Christians. You got one Holy Spirit living in your heart. You got one hope that heaven is coming, and you have one Lord.
Dr. David Jeremiah continues his series in Ephesians, Belief That Behaves, next time on Turning Point.
Weekday mornings at 9 o'clock here on KDKR.
In 1 Corinthians, Paul reminds us to run the race of life to win the prize. Join me, Dr. Erwin Lutzer, for Running to Win. Be strengthened to finish your race with confidence.
Weekday mornings at 8 o'clock here on KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. 1-877-913-5357. Tony Joe, as I was driving back to the office today, I thought to myself, because I knew we were going to talk about and I was looking at my gauges and thinking, what's the normal temperature of the car, so that if it's either higher, if it is higher than that normal level, then that's a warning sign, right?
Correct. That is correct. So that's a good point. Now that you bring it up, Bob. How long? We've only been doing this program for 20 years or so, and I know it's early, okay, but we have talked to death about looking at your gauges. Why do you need to know? You watch your gauges because you need to know what's going on with your vehicle. It displays charging system. It displays overheating. It displays, of course, how much fuel you have in the car. That's always good to know. It explains, oil pressure, temperatures in the transmission in some vehicles. It displays a lot of information that you could use. Now, the problem is, what you just described is a very good scenario for explaining something, and that is, you look at your gauges anyway. You should always be looking at your gauges. I don't mean every second, but I mean you should always know about what normal is on your car. If you see something abnormal, then you take proactive steps to either cool the car down or shut it off. Or you got to know these things, but you got to know what normal is to begin with for your car. So you should look at your gauges from time to time and kind of say, well, about the middle of the gauge is about normal. So that's good. Now I know. And then one day, like you're wondering, wow, if the car got hot, how would I know? Well, it would go beyond the normal range. You know what the normal is because you've been eyeballing it every now and then, so you kind of familiarize yourself with normal. Now, if all of a sudden the temperature gauge rises to 3/4 of the gauge or maybe even hotter, you know there's something wrong. There's got to be something wrong, and you notice that because you can reference to what normal is. What do you do in that situation? Well, we talked about turning the heater on, which nobody likes, but it is very effective, and it works most of the time, and it doesn't fix anything. It buys you time to get to the next exit and get off and find out what's really wrong. Second thing you can do, Bob, if you know you're in a bottleneck and you know that you're not going to be moving for a few minutes, it's a good thing to do for your car to put it in park or neutral, but generally people will put it in park and rev the car up a little bit. And when I say rev it up a little bit, that means if the RPM gauge is available, or the tachometer we call it, you want to rev it up to about 1,500 RPMs. Okay, 1,000. A car will idle normally at 600 to 700. You can run it up to 1,000 and you'll hardly even hear a difference. Run it up to about 1,500, halfway between 1 and 2, and it gets the water pump spinning faster, it gets the alternator spinning faster, it gets the air conditioner spinning faster. It creates more of a powerful scenario for everything to function properly and more efficiently. When you're at idle, things do not function efficiently. It wasn't designed to really stay at idle that long, and it really can hurt your car. So I only say to do this if you're in a long traffic jam, accident, or construction, something where you know you're not going to be moving. You obviously cannot do this if you're bumper to bumper and you're moving at 2 miles an hour. At that point, you just have to do what you have to do. But if it's a prolonged period of time, that's when you want to put the car in park instead of just sitting there with your... Think about this, Bob. A lot of people don't realize just your foot on the brake alone, all the wiring going back to your brake lights, drawing all that current, makes the alternator demand higher. And the air conditioner is demanding current from the alternator. And you've got all these, you probably got the radio on and the air conditioning on, the foot on the brake, plus that the engine is running slower than normal. All these things added up can combine to cause alternator failure, battery failure, overheating, air conditioner not working good. These can all combine into a number of things, different scenarios that will lead to expensive problems down the road. Right. So try to keep in mind that a car is not really designed to sit there and idle for long. You can do it. It will work, but time after time, over and over, year after year, it's going to take its toll on the car.
So Chris at the station had a question for me, he wanted me to ask. Has this ever happened to you in your Ferrari?
No, because I never slow down to get in bumper. No, because I'm never going that slow, Chris. Anything under 150,
Yeah.
It's like, I can't live like this. I got to get going. I got things to do.
I can't see you in a Ferrari.
Well, You not only can't you see me, you will never see me.
Okay, so we have 10 of these items we're going to go to. We're down to the second one.
I believe,
par for
before
the
we
course.
move on, speaking of Ferrari, before we move on, and I can say this because I'm Italian, I firmly believe that Italians should stick to making spaghetti and meatballs and good wine and so forth and leave the car business to somebody else.
Okay. I don't
Just
know.
saying.
I don't know what to say.
You know what Fiat stands for, don't you?
No, I don't, and I'm afraid to ask.
Fix it again, Tony.
Okay, so you are looking at your tires,
Okay.
and you notice that one of your tires is literally coming apart. What do you do?
Yeah, that's bad. Okay, you're looking at your tires. You mean like your car's in the garage and you're just looking at the tires, and you see coming apart. You see metal. You see metal.
You see metal.
Okay.
And because this actually happened to me, as you know.
Okay.
And it happened because I do what I think a lot of people do. Is they put it off. They go, yeah, they're the tires are a little bit bald, but
Is that got anything to do with spinning the wheels, maybe?
has nothing to do with spinning the wheels.
No.
So, you're getting as much out. It's just like my water heater at the house. It went 22 years, and I finally replaced it when the pipe started banging against the wall or making that sound. Same thing, and I just got lucky. But if you don't want to be driving on these, right?
No, you don't. If you see metal cords coming through the rubber part of the tire, that means you probably shouldn't even drive the car. That's a dangerous scenario for a blowout or something. I mean, here's the thing that you got to consider, Bob, and this is good information just for everybody, just general information. Cars today have really expensive wheels. Most car wheels now are of some fancy alloy or design that makes them a whole lot more expensive than a metal rim used to be that you could buy from the wrecking yard for $10. If you get a blowout or if you get a flat even, the tire is going to be between the ridge, the inner and outer ridges of the rim and the asphalt or concrete surface. So if you drive on that, you're going to cut that tire and probably damage that rim. A tire that gets down to the metal, Bob, should have been spotted earlier, and I know you just happened to look and you saw it, which is good that you did.
Well, what I saw though looked like string.
Well, they were metal. They were metal cords from what we call a radial tire. Okay, the radial tires that we have today have actual steel cords inside the tire. And what you saw was the steel mesh, right? The rubber must have been run down so far that the steel mesh was starting to show these little tiny metal things that you're trying to explain. So if you're seeing those, see, what I try to get people to do is I try to teach people how to check their tires, because it's very simple to look at your tires once in a while if you understand what wear bars are. They put them in the tire. They're there for a reason, and even someone that doesn't know anything about a car can check them. You can look at them, and if you don't know how to use them, you can look it up online. They're tiny little pieces of rubber in between the tread, and when the tread gets even with the wear bar, it's time for you to start. It doesn't mean you got to go immediately, but it means you got to start thinking about getting some tires. These tires are worn down to their minimum thickness. That's where the wear bar comes into play.
So real quick, because we're running out of time. If that's only happening to one tire,
okay,
then there's something structurally wrong, right?
Good question. If that only happens to one tire and all the other tires look healthy, then you've got a front end, or if this is in the back, then a rear end alignment problem. Many cars today have to be aligned both front and rear. So if you've got that kind of a situation, yeah, you need to really have the vehicle checked for an alignment or have it realigned. That indicates, a problem from side to side.
Yeah, it's amazing what tires cost these days too.
Oh yes, Fuel is up, tires are up. Remember that. Anything made from fossil fuel, it's garbage bags, plastics, fuel. When fuel goes up, diesel fuel goes up, everything goes up.
That's our cue. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.